Copyright University of Auckland, all rights reserved. The content and delivery of lectures in this course are protected by copyright. Material belonging to others may have been used in these lectures and copied by and solely for the educational purposes of the university under license. You may record the lectures for the purposes of private study or research, but you may not sell, alter, or further reproduce or distribute any part of these lectures to any other person. Failure to comply with the terms of this warning may expose you to legal action for copyright infringement by the copyright owner and/or disciplinary action by the university.
Okay, hey guys. So what we'll do is we'll start now, and then I think we're expecting a few more people, but they'll just file in and they'll take the seats in the back just for time and whatnot. So thank you for coming. This is, I think, our 7th or 8th seminar of the series, sponsored by Disaster Prevention Management Journal. Thanks to them, the Emerald and stuff, making it all possible. We have 3 guests today as opposed to 1, so they're all going to be sharing their experiences of the Nepalese earthquake that happened recently, and make comments and discussions after sustainability and perspectives and whatnot. So the first one is Yagya, and he's a scholar, educator, and survivor of the latest batch of earthquakes. He has got a lot of perspective on the whole issue. He's going to share us what he thinks and questions of sustainability and whatnot. And then after that we have Shushma, who was here during the earthquake, but she's from Nepal, doing a PhD, so she will comment as an insider, but from the outsider's perspective. And then finally we have Simon Lewis from Metro, who will wrap things up and comment from an NGOs perspective and make comments from there as well. Then what we'll do is we'll have a little bit of time after they speak to comment on each other's work and see what they can share and experiences, and then we'll open the floor up for everybody else to talk and ask questions and whatnot, and then light refreshment and drinks afterwards, so please stay around. We've got lots of food and biscuits as usual. Okay, so I'll open it up first. Thank you so much for speaking.
Hi guys. I'm very much pleased to share some of my experiences and situation that we have faced recently during the earthquake situation in the country. So I will just start from my own story, how I faced the challenges and things that happened. So on 25th of April, I was supposed to fly to New Zealand at evening 11:30 p.m. flight. So I was just visiting my relatives in the morning and returning back to home, and on the way, just 400 meters far from my home, while I was collecting my jacket, which I have just given for small maintenance in one shop. So it was a 4-story building, and while I entered inside the building, I just felt some shaking. So I said, it's earthquake. Because I know drop, cover up, drop, and hold. That's things that we normally to teach to the community level, because I worked for 10 years with one NGO as an education practitioner as well as the community development worker. So these things we have been teaching to our communities, to all the people. But what I felt, what I realized inside the 4-story building while I was there to collect my jacket and getting first shake, a small shake, then I said, it's earthquake, get out, because I realized that's a big building and we have, the construction things is not so wisely, just not in the sense of earthquake perspective, almost all the buildings not are constructed in that way. So we just get out, and after few minutes, 30 seconds later on, the wall of this house, the first floor wall, just fell down. So it was, very difficult situation, and for 1.5 minutes, the earth, everything, 7.8 magnitudes, earthquake, the first earthquake in 25th morning time stopped, and I heard the voice from the inside the house, the old people, they are asking, just only they're asking God, what is happening? Just please survive us. Children are crying. The water tank just dropping down from the top of the house. So very strange. I never, ever just imagine that situation happened in my life. So I was just thinking about my wife and daughter. They were still in the home alone. So everything, very difficult, very difficult. Then after 1.5 minutes later, it's just becoming normal. Then I just run. But how can I run? Every boundary wall is just filled in all the way to my home. But I made it, and I saw my family there. They're also standing out. Very difficult situation, and so many houses, so many things disturbed it. But luckily, we also survived ourselves. No any casualties happen in our communities. So that's the story, and it was very difficult. No communication, no telephone line. We didn't have anything. So my flight was scheduled at 11:30 p.m. and I have paid 80,000 Nepalese rupees. That is around $800. So I need to go because some flights happened. So I thought could be the flight's happening. So I just managed the taxi. Normally it takes 30 minutes from my house to the airport, but at that day it took 50 minutes because all the way it's very difficult. So the roads, the collapse in some places also, so need to get another alternative road also. Very difficult situation. Anyway, I went to the airport, then I noticed that all flights cancelled because these are where the flights just from India and from other some sort of recovery and other things that immediately happen from the neighboring countries. So that's the story. It's very tension. And after returning back to home, just I found my daughter and wife in a small top dumpling, the tent that we have made for and the rain started. So we spent 3-4 days in the tent, and after such just going on. So the next day, and another we encountered 6.2 magnitude aftershock. So very difficult situation. So at this time, I just realized that unless and until if we all people have a strength or some sort of knowledge how to cope with the situation, how to have some sort of understanding about such disaster, so all people can have some sort of this good situation. They can just manage themselves and adjust themselves. So our children, they cried. Our old people, they have very difficult, stressful time at that time. And interesting thing is, I was just planning to do my PhD in Auckland Uni, including the excluded, analyzing the cause of exclusion in primary education in Nepal before that. But within this 3 weeks time, I just realized that no, that won't be my topic. I need to focus on disaster risk reduction education area because that's the big things. And how can we just develop resilience to disaster to our community? How can we aware our community people, all people, so that they can have strength to adjust with any sort of disaster thing. So I just then after arriving here, I just shared these things to my supervisor. So I'm now working. It changed my academic career too. Yeah, it's very interesting. And during the time, very good thing is that the community unity, the community people, they united. They constructed temporary sort of settlement, because the government also not initiated immediately any response. So we waited for a couple of hours. So until 12 hours, nothing we have, nothing, any information, anything, After 9-10 hours, one helicopter just surrounded our community and other things also. But lots of flight and others from international communities just started. Yeah, in the community level, so very difficult situation. People just stayed out, have trauma, stigma, fear. People just, very difficult situation, open defecation. So lots of things happened. And that's the Kathmandu situation. And what we lost, lots of things, cultural heritage, school buildings, health facilities, so many casualties, 9,000 people we just, lost. So 8,000 around the schools we just lost. So lots of things we lost during this big earthquake situation. So yeah, very, very difficult, and it's very good that non-governmental organizations and NGOs and INGOs, they started their work, yeah, immediately, and we also received support from the international, all helping hand. So that are, from the insider perspective, these are quite, appreciated things, very good things happen. But it was very difficult to reach the communities, mainly to the remote areas, yeah, where those are the road blocked during the earthquake, and then so many other things like in Kaliganjaki stuck for so many hours, big landslides just happen. So these are the other things that occurred after the earthquake also. So in my own experiences, the recovery, still some more interventions, more support that is essential for the community people. But good things happened, like in the schools, parents, students, community peoples, as well as the teachers, they are just have some sort of environment so that they can just share their stigma, and then children are now not so afraid, and they started the schools and back to schools. Even 37 days the schools were closed, it's very difficult because hundreds of children they just killed, and 45 teachers they also died. So mainly the thing is that it was on Saturday, that's the school holidays. Otherwise 8,000 schools, multiplied average 200 schools, students, then we can just imagine that 8,000 into 200, how many students, and it will be very difficult situation. So yeah, but we are lucky that it just struck on Saturday, and another, the aftershock big one also just on the holiday time, school holiday time. So yeah, the thing is mainly the construction. If we are not aware about earthquake, just preventive way, then these are the things that lots of death and casualties happen because of the weaker construction thing. So this time our communities, they have that sort of realization, they face that sort of thing. So it is now they are talking more about a safer construction way. So it's very good thing. And another thing is united the community, and we just initiated something helping each other, or help each other. So some sort of communal things. That's also the culture in the country, but it also helps to support each other, and people just get immediately support from one another. That's one good thing. And definitely the local CBOs, local NGOs, supporting from other INGOs is relevant. It's very relevant and appropriate. So that I observed during the thing and participated in some interventions also. But still, because we lost lots of things, and it will take so many years to rebuild, reconstruct all the things, mainly the cultural heritage sites, and the schools facilities, health facilities, all the things. So in my perspective, the sustainable development should be, I think, disaster risk reduction part need to be incorporated in each interventions of the community level things, either in education or in health or in other environmental everything. Because if all people they aware about how to just adjust, how to cope with the situation, that they know, they understand, they have that ability, that definitely help. One thing is that we practice go back in some communities, but we found that the provision of go back that we have is not so contextualized, so it was not useful at that time. So people they just said that no, because no idea where they kept it, and could be we didn't monitor properly, because it should be easily accessible, and other relevant things need to be managed as well as the culturally accepted things. So some things, the contextualized practices need to be incorporated in the disaster risk reduction area. So that's one another learning. So yeah, from government provisions, we have still just one law is just tabled the day before yesterday in the parliament. So there is this issue of reconstruction again. So many people, 700,000 around house we just lost, partially damaged during this earthquake situation. So yeah, somehow people are facing difficulty with getting resources to rebuild their houses, to settlements, because some villages very vulnerable to the landslide because of this earthquake. So so many things need to be done for the better recovery, but at least still the stigma, they have fear, they have some sort of, they are not still confident that, they will have a good sort of lifestyle, because people are facing the sanitation, hygiene problem, very difficult livelihood situation, these all things, because it's a poorer country, and that situation again contributed for being more poorer because of not having adequate resources. So I think at least identification of those people and then providing them immediate support as well as some sort of skills and other things, also good intervention for them to cope their strength to adjust with the situation and recovery. Yeah, so, okay, yeah.
So, Dave,
Okay, yeah. My feeling is, as an insider, such incidents are really, as a learning, very difficult to cope by the individual, by the family, and government also need to be more serious about such disaster, situation, and you need to be more prepared, because that's one feeling that we have. For getting trampoline or tents, the people need to wait months. Yeah, so because the rain just started, the monsoon just started, and it just made the people's life more difficult. So at least somehow the government also, from the government side, also need to be more prepared, at least such sort of emergency situation, what should be done, or what sort of mechanism need to be activated quickly. So it was really a very difficult situation, and most of the Nepalese people with that time realized that what's our government doing, because that was a very difficult situation. But later on, after 2 days, then our government also took very good initiation, and then international support, it's just happened very positively. That's a good thing.
So did you see a quicker response from international NGOs and NGOs in comparison to the government?
Yeah. So international NGO means not immediate through the intervention, but local CBOs, like local NGOs. So they initiated some things locally, and later on, government also requested all the international, agencies and organizations. So that's also a good thing. Different government from different countries, they just send security personnel to respond to the crisis. So that's a good thing. So INGOs also started the work, but not immediately like the government did. But that's a very good sort of collaborative work to make more impact, like the government made the policies, and initially we made the decision to go inside the one-door system to avoid some sort of corruption or misuse of funds. But later on, we realized that's not working well. Then immediately government just make another provision. Okay, support can be made in a different perspective. As soon as need to go to the target beneficiaries and provide support to them. Is that okay? Yeah. The interventions happen, but not immediately by INGOs. INGOs go through. Simon will just share later on. But my feeling as an worker, ING worker, as well as the community development practitioner, so my feeling is CBOs, local NGOs, they make a good response for the disaster crisis. And that is because of the international INGO support also. Because it's an emergency time, so they don't have immediate project beforehand, they just have to got approval one, but they just make negotiation, and after 3-4 days, they collected something, started the relief work, and then have something for it. Yeah. Good, thank you so much.
So, any questions, comments on or should we move on to Shushma? Shushma, do you want to?
Can we just use the one?
Hello, everybody. I'm also a Nepalese and currently doing a PhD in disaster recovery, taking Nepal as an example. And before I joined the PhD, I was also working with some international NGOs just for a few years and in the sector of forestry and disaster risk reduction. When the earthquake hit Nepal, I wasn't there. And actually, I was Skyping with my husband when the earthquake was just there. So it was so scary for me to wait since the earthquake hit and since the time he called, because I had no contact for at least 20 minutes. But 20 minutes felt like so many hours, because I wasn't sure whether they are like alive or dead. And a lot of friends, like Kiwi friends, and also from friends from Nepal, was saying that I was like really lucky, like not to be in Nepal and not going through like sleeping in the street, because everyone was doing that, like finding shelter and everything. But at the same time, in physically, yes, it was a kind of I was safer and much in a better position than everyone. But mentally, it was such a difficult and hard time for me to go through all these and just waiting for the phone calls. And one of the good things was there was free calls from Skype and also from 2 Degrees for the phone and everything. So it really helped to make like frequent calls and know what is really happening in Nepal, because the whole like 2, 3, maybe a week, I was just listening, watching the videos and like seeing online news and Facebook things. And it was so horrible to see the pictures of devastation, and it was so like, it was very negative and it really scared me a lot. But when I was like talking to my family and friends in Nepal, I get a very complete different pictures. Of course, there was like a devastation, there was damages, there were people who were dead, but they were also saying about like what they were doing, like what, even in my family, it was like a collection, like the house of my husband was like a collection for like clothes and even like a tent, the fabric of the tents, because tent wasn't much available. So they collected and they went to many different places. They didn't have much time to talk to me, but anyway, and also like it was not just from the family, but also from like private offices, like commercial offices. They were also like opening up areas for people to live inside and like clubs, like as Yageji told me, like it told us, like there was like clubs and also like CBOs who were helping a lot, and they come like very immediately. It was like from my research, I knew that there was a like in the rural areas there is a like lot of social cohesion and like of brotherhood, so the support is very common. But I was surprised that it will happen in the core Kathmandu, because it's like now so modern that people like, it's like in Western, some of like in the main cities of the Western world, that it's like people don't know each other even inside the same building. So I found it like really interesting, but at the same time it was really interesting, and I was very sad, and I felt so guilty that I wasn't the part of, I couldn't do anything, like sitting here, besides some fundraising. So that was strange, and I wouldn't have known all these things unless I was like talking to my friends and family, and it felt so good. Like, of course, that was a painful experience, but still like felt so good that there was something very positive going on in Nepal. And one of my friends, former colleague, was kept in the Facebook saying that this earthquake was both like a worst of the nature and the best of humanity. And it was really nice, because that was what really was happening. And then the support was not just like clothes, foods, and shelter, like blankets and everything, but people people actually like walked the way to like the remote areas, like some of the remote areas where they had to pass through like landslides, and they had to pass through rock falls and so many things. And I got the information from my friends, and also from my mother lives in a different city, so she wasn't much affected, and she has like tenants from the villages, so they were like telling us about these stories, that the ones who came first to their villages were not like government or international NGOs or anyone, but it was the ordinary people who came with like blankets and everything from their own expenses, like community expenses, It And even like I could see pictures of street children in Kathmandu, because Kathmandu has a real problem with street children, and they are like considered as the most vulnerable and the weakest group of the society. And they were even like very active in like fund collection and volunteering, a lot of like cleaning debris, and it was like really one of the best part of the maybe Nepal earthquake. And also like and in the rural areas, the people who reached there were not only from the neighboring communities, but they were also people from Kathmandu. Like I cannot even imagine like how they reach from like Kathmandu to those areas, like because they have to walk, like even they could use the vehicle until a certain place, they had to walk miles to things and carry a lot of things, right? But it was coming from like this is such a power of like humanity, no? And so it was really nice. And the other thing which I found it strange was like, because I was spending so much of time looking into the online news and the social, like it's so difficult to avoid, and it's so interesting because you see different perspective of the views and perspective, but it wasn't really helping me or neither the community, you know, because there was a major issue about like the government, like soon after the earthquake, like after I think a couple of days, the government announced like that all the aid and the individual aid and the aid from the organization should go into a certain fund, which we call it like a Prime Minister Disaster Relief Fund. So, and then it was, and the idea, like the idea behind was to like stop duplicacy of work, because everyone is going to the same community and there are so much of things in one place and the other doesn't have anything, and also to like minimize inequalities of relief distribution and maybe transparency. But then it also meant that such kind of decision was also like it was controlling the freedom of a lot of individuals and agencies, you know, like they cannot spend the money on their own wish or whatever they want. So then immediately after that was announced, there was so many articles, so many online news, like especially the international online news. So they were all like criticizing government. Of course, it's a criticism. It's in a way it is right, and they were criticizing like the Nepalese government is so corrupted and they are so slow to respond, and this idea was just to get more money for inside the government and stuff like this. And some of them were like, it was okay like to express the views, but there were some not agencies, but individuals and agencies, they were even saying that the Prime Minister Fund is a private fund of the government, which is so foolish to say, because you have to at least know what it is before you comment on it. But so this was all this kind of flowing things, and this was like really a bad influence on how people donated money and how like things went on. But then again, after a while, and there is another stream of news, like after like a couple of days, there was another article asking about the questioning about transparency of the individual aid and individual aid agencies or other agencies, also like questioning about the corruption and stuff like this. So they were like pointing on each other. So in the process, it was like more like the response was so much delayed. That was one of the main reasons why it was also delayed, in my view. So this was like really not helpful, because that wasn't the real time to discuss about all the problems in the country, right? It was an emergency situation and people really need immediate help. So that was one of the things that I found it very difficult to deal with when you are here and you don't know the like real situation. And at least I know, as being a part of, like I had to talk with my friends, my family and friends, and I also knew what is going on in Nepal, like as a citizen. But then for an outsider, it would be a very like a setback for helping Nepal or doing some positive things, you know. So that was Yeah, there was something that I wanted to share. And the other, and now after it's about around 5 months after the earthquake, right? So now it's so difficult to get any information about what is happening about the reconstruction. And because we had earthquakes, and after that we subsequently had monsoon, so people were just moving from one place to another, and there were more landslides and so many stuff going on. So there wasn't many things happening, but I could read some articles and see some picture about the transitional shelter, like how people are building and how NGOs are helping and what government is doing, but not really much, because now the focus is turned into constitution making. Because Nepal has been waiting for struggling for a new constitution since decades, and this earthquake was a real push for the government to show that they also have to do something nice or something. So they immediately came with a draft, and now the good thing is that it's passed, and in 2 or 3 days we have a new constitution. So that was a really good thing. And there was again even within these ones there was so many articles say criticizing about why government is not focusing on recovery and just focusing on constitution, because we also had a lot of fights and so many deadly things in some parts of the country. So, but in my view, I think constitution is a really important thing for a long-term recovery. And the problem in Nepal wasn't response, because despite of all these challenges, because it's normal, it would happen in any countries which is hit by a disaster, right? So the major problem is more on longer term recovery, because from the research that I have been doing since the last 3 years, focusing on the example in Nepal. So we don't have a long-term policies on resettlement, and we have few policies, but it's not clearly defined on who is doing it, who is taking the leadership. So it's so blurred. So it could be a very difficult point, and unless there is a new constitution, it would take a long time to come up to that point, I'm very sure. And the other thing is the local governments in Nepal is really, really weak. Really weak, and this was even shown during the response. People were a lot of people commented on why response is difficult, right? But one of the real problem was not just because it was a physical inaccessibility or remoteness, but it was also because the local government was so powerless. They couldn't take a charge, and a lot of relief things were forcefully taken by the people. Maybe it was a local elites or maybe specific groups, and maybe they could have distributed to the affected people. You never know, but they could, because they want to also influence a community, in difficult times. But then the government, then it shows that the government is so weak that you cannot even take responsibility of the local government, cannot take responsibility. And it's also because it's they don't have a capacity, even in remote areas, they only have 2 staffs and very few resources and stuff like this, which makes the problem so much more severe, and no one can monitor. It's very difficult to monitor in the remote areas. And the other thing was also when the response was, when the government asked for the application for the response, usually when you're affected, then you apply for the relief things which should be approved from the local government and police and this kind of authorities. But then in many of the remote areas, it was realized that the application that came to the government were double or triple than the total number of household, which was, and they commented that it was because maybe the local government was threatened by the community, so it was. So it shows how weak the local government, and it's and if we are reconstructing, if Nepal is reconstructing in these areas, of course that will be the responsibility of the local government, because the central will not be able to handle all these remote areas, especially with the physical inaccessibilities. So this is one of the main gap. And also about the and the problems are not just, and also like with aspect to international agencies, like we have a privilege of having so much of resources from the international community and international government, right? But then and they have so much of potential, and the technical and community, they have like so much of experience, and it's a huge potential for Nepal. But then like most of the NGOs are mostly focusing only on like immediate response, and no one is like looking much into like a longer term recovery. So it's so if they could also like look into some bits and pieces and work with it could be like really a good push for the whole thing of recovery. And also, and this is the other one is the kind of findings from my research, that the problems are much deeper in Nepal, not just it wasn't just the earthquake, like because in media and in news there was like remote areas are going food scarce and stuff like this, but they were never like they always had this problem. It's not just because of the earthquake, it was just like amplified because of the earthquake and stuff like this. And also in like in Kathmandu, where the houses collapsed, were like either very old buildings, or because they weren't properly looked after, or maybe not properly conserved. And the other areas where a lot of houses collapsed were areas which were mentioned as not habitable by the zoning and physical things, but still the houses were made, like, and things are happening so much. And like even if you look at the documents, everything is so good, but when it's implemented really, and these are like so bad things. So these are so this is earthquake is not just a problem. So in my view, like a longer, if we are looking for a sustainable reconstruction or recovery, then it's important to look at least three aspects. Maybe reconstruction, where I mean that maybe building of houses, because there are so many houses, like Yagechi said, like thousands of houses were destroyed, so people need shelter to live in. But then what kind of approach in like reconstruction? Because and for sure it should be like a people-centered reconstruction, because in most of the areas it wouldn't be even like possible to start reconstruction without involving local communities. And the other thing would be like on policies, like strengthening policies, and not just on policies, but also implementation, the whole channel from policies to implementation, because though we have policies, but we don't have a proper implementation, so it's no use. So maybe that could be another focus. And when the focus is only on like houses and bridges or something, but it should also be focused on livelihoods, like overall livelihood, because it's not the houses like in communities, especially if I focus on remote areas, which is the major Nepal is predominantly like rural. So if we focus just on those, so these are places where people can easily build houses like normal houses. It's not they need money, of course, and they get like borrow money and this kind of things, but it's not the biggest problem. But the biggest problem is they have like lost lands with landslides, like from earthquakes, and they, even with earthquakes, their lands are so cracked they cannot do cultivation. So that is, so there should be a look into into livelihood things also. And the other thing would be like a normal development, which is going on, like strengthening local government and stuff like this. So if these all things are integrated, maybe we can move forward with a better reconstruction, sustainable reconstruction. It sounds very complex, but of course everything is connected. So if we just focus on one thing, it could be we couldn't be like thinking about the long term. So that is my view. So thank you for listening.
So can we get Simon to talk? Right. So then after that we'll have the floor for questions. Thank you so much.
My name is Simon Lewis, and I guess I work for ADRA in New Zealand, but for 4.5 years I worked for ADRA in Nepal. So here I am. This is actually the screen. The day that I found out that I had the job here in New Zealand with some of the ADRA New Zealand team, and doing normal country director stuff, you know, cutting ribbons and signing agreements. And this is one of my favourite shots up here. After this, this is actually Victoria Frey from ADRA New Zealand, and we went. We thought there was a wedding going on in the community, and it was just to welcome us. And after this, I made sure that it was only 2 malas, no more than 2 malas, because I looked like a Teletubby going through there. Oh, do you want the microphone? Is that okay?
It's fine with the. You could do it.
Oh yeah, okay. I found, like Shushma, I found out of the earthquake when I was here. Within 15 minutes of the earthquake happening, I was actually messaging people from ADRA Nepal. And the fact that I could actually talk to someone or message made me realise the numbers that we had predicted would be devastating to Kathmandu hadn't affected Kathmandu as badly as it seemed. The fact that the 60% of the mobile phone towers are sitting on top of buildings, so the fact that there was still a network going on meant the buildings were still there. So that was one relief for me. I arrived back in Nepal a week after the initial earthquake. There was still 3 or 4 days of no flights and that sort of thing. So by the time I organised to arrive, the flights were back to sort of a regular basis. One of the other things that I did in Nepal was I was part of the AIN. And if you want to know more information about the NGOs work in Nepal, then go to this website, the Association of International NGOs in Nepal. I was part of the steering committee for 3 years, and part of that we met different government ministers. This is the Minister for Local Development. And also we had these technical working groups, and I'm sorry, this is the health working group, sitting on top of the Save the Children office. And different NGOs, all these people here represent different NGOs, and we work together in a sector. So there's a lot of different technical working groups. There's a disaster one, there's a climate change one, education, health, water, youth, and disability. So if you want to know more information about the NGOs, in the INGO members of AIN, 87 of the 116 members are doing emergency and recovery work from the earthquake. Some of the NGOs maybe not so much related, or they might be doing things like justice or governance type situations, and they might not have specific earthquake projects, but 87 out of the 116 members. Now, about half of the INGOs in Nepal are members of AIN. So there's around 240 members, INGOs present before the earthquake, and there's probably been 150 that are new ones that have turned up.
So why is that? Why have they not joined or joined?
They have different reasons. Some of them are just one-man shows, person working out of a home, and it costs about $500 a year to be a member. It's really worth it, I mean, for an INGO, but some of them just don't feel that they can do that. Or there's some sort of reason headquarters won't let them, sometimes like that. Before the earthquake, we had the cluster system. So who does not know about the cluster system? Okay, that's good. I'll tell you anyway. The cluster system is a UN-based system that was designed basically after the Asian tsunami to help in coordination of emergency recovery. Now, Nepal is one of those countries that has a standing cluster system. It's working before the emergency. So I was a big part of the food security cluster, but different NGOs were members of the different clusters in according to their thing. And so this was not just a national thing, it was actually in the districts. Every district had a cluster system set up in their district. So Sushma was talking about government policies. These are some of the things that were working in the benefit of NGOs and recovery before the earthquake. There was what we call a district lead support agency. So every district, out of the 75 districts in Nepal, every district was given one NGO, INGO, that could facilitate the preparation for a disaster. And ADRA, believe it or not, was the lead agency in Kavre and Darding. So Kavre and Darding, Kavre is the district between Kathmandu and Sindupolchuk, where the second earthquake was, and Darding is in between Kathmandu and Gorkha. So those two districts, ADRA had helped the local district prepare great plans, fantastic plans. And when we got there and we talked to the chief district officer, the CDO, he didn't know anything about it. So it just shows that the plans and policies are only good if they haven't got dust on them, if they're being used and all that sort of stuff. Another thing, every DRR program had to include something about earthquakes. So they knew it was coming, so every single project had to address earthquakes. And the other thing that was in the benefit, and Sushma talked about the local community aspect of it. An INGO, as part of a signatory agreement with the government, cannot implement any development work themselves. They can do some emergency work themselves, but not development work. You have to work through a local NGO. And out of the local NGOs, there's more than 33,000 local NGOs registered with the SWC, the Social Welfare Council. Basically, have you got any local NGO? Are you a member of a local NGO?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Are you? Do you know anyone? Anyone in your family?
In my family?
Yeah.
No one friends.
Yeah. Because you can get 3 or 4 people joined together around a table, and we can start our own NGO. So it's very locally based, and some of them are multi-million-dollar operations, and some of them are totally grassroots. We're helping people just in our village. So there's a big range of capacity in that. The other thing that was an advantage that not many people have talked about was the fact that there was a number of Nepali peacekeeping battalions that were working in Haiti when the earthquake happened. And I tried to find evidence of it, but I was told this story that on the day that the earthquake happened in Haiti in 2010 was a 150th anniversary of one of the battalions that sent peacekeepers to Haiti. And all the Nepali soldiers in the 3 different battalions that were there were out on a big oval parading around as in their 150th anniversary celebrations, and not one of them was killed. And they, before the US Marines came and arrived and took over the security, Nepal security forces were in charge of security and immediate rescue in Nepal. Now, anytime you type in Nepal Army Peacekeepers Haiti, it comes up with a cholera outbreak. And so it's been swamped with what Nepal peacekeepers actually did in Haiti before the US arrived and saved the day. The key thing that I bring about this is that these peacekeepers, these soldiers, these leaders in the army came back to Nepal and were spread out across a number of battalions as trainers. And so the security forces really had a really good handle on the immediate response to earthquakes after an event. And Haiti's construction and Nepal's constructions are very similar. So this was a definite advantage for Nepal. So here's the earthquakes, and this is where they happened, and this is the intensity. So Kathmandu's in here, first big one here, 7.8 you experienced, and I was in Nepal when the 7.3 occurred. Things were shaking and it was pretty scary. But you can see it's sort of scattered. Well, there's a big block of a number of districts, and they say 14 districts have been affected by the earthquakes, some more than others. And you can see that there's various patches, basically due to geology. So Sindupolchuk, this district here, has basically 100% of the buildings have been affected. Every single building in the whole district has been affected. Some of them, the foundations are gone and but they'll have to be destroyed. So these are some of the reconstruction things that are going on. This is an actual picture. We had an ADRA worker going up to Roshua, which is a mountain district up here. Roshua. So the road comes here, goes around and up here, and she was up in here looking at what to do. And you can see the landslides that occurred before, and this is the actual landslide during the earthquake, or the second big earthquake. And you can see the type of terrain. So these are villages here, just little houses and paddy fields scattered on top, and now you've lost this land, like Shushma was saying. So these are some of the restrictions and conditions that people have to deal with. Another thing, an advantage that an NGO has, is they are prepared to work. This picture was taken in the ADRA office the Sunday morning after the earthquake. So about 18 hours, 15 hours they were working, and 18 hours they were working for preparation, and by the end of that day they were handing out tarpaulins. We had things ready, and most NGOs were the same, for an immediate response. Small, obviously overwhelmed, but this is the NGO key staff of an NGO that were working. Oh, the figures there. So AIN calculated that within 3 months the INGOs had done $200 million worth of response work from their members. That's not counting the big donors, direct US aid to the government and things like that. So it is an avenue that can provide pretty good activities. I'm going to concentrate on the reconstruction side of things, because that's what JC told me to. Because recovery, like Shushma said, it covers so many different things. And if you talk to a water specialist, they'll say, you know, the water systems are the most important things. We need to get them going, you know. And the civil engineers will say, we need to get the roads cleared and the bridges built, and, you know, things like that. So as far as shelter goes, this is the standard government pack that we were told to do. And you can imagine there's 2 tarpaulins and 2 blankets and a household kit that may or may not provide cooking things is not too much. This is the standard one for the temporary shelter and self-recovery. So the government have said 15,000 rupees, which is about 220 New Zealand dollars, where the markets are, and you can go and take that money and buy things. But I tried to find, I don't think any of this money has been released.
No, because just in the parliament.
That's right. So you imagine, multiply that number by 700,000 houses, you've got a lot of money. Who's going to pay for it? The government say, yeah, give them all this money. Then they go to the World Bank or the ADB and, you know, we need, you know, $300 million to give people roofing iron. It's a pretty big ask. If the market's not there, we're 2 bundles of corrugated galvanised iron for people to build their own houses. And this is what is happening all over Nepal. People are building their own things. They're not waiting for the government. You know, it's the self-sufficiency is quite an incredible thing. And then up to $150 in cash or kind supplementary support to vulnerable households. So I'll go back to the lessons from Haiti. One of the things we were told is to move from emergency to transitional housing as soon as possible. There are still people living under tarpaulins in Haiti now, 5 years after that Haiti earthquake. If we don't move to transitional houses that can actually last for multiple seasons, you know, where will people live? And this is another one that Shushma's already talked about, but the media, and this is what happened in Haiti, they depicted the foreign aid agencies, the NGOs, the Marines, you know, as the heroes, but it's the ordinary Nepalese, it's already the ordinary Haitians that did most of the work, and this is still happening today. And another one that you've already said, the citizens must be empowered to participate in their own decisions.
In terms of the media
Yeah.
and the depicting the foreign aid as the heroes, do you think that would result in a decrease in funding to the heroes if it was like Nepalese,
Yeah.
like solidarity and they're like doing it themselves and they're all okay? Like, don't you think that had like a different impact back here for people sending money?
Yeah. I think, and one of the things that we aim to do, and I think a lot of NGOs aim to do, is to educate the donor.
Yeah.
We can't, we need to, I think we've done a pretty good job in educating donors to not to fill up a container full of stuff and send it over. You know, broken stuff from a garage sale, and I mean, I've seen it. When I was in the tsunami in Samoa, the first container that we opened, 20-foot container, thinking, we didn't know who sent it, didn't know what was in it. No, they just said, this is arrived for ADRA. So we took it over, we cracked the thing, high expectation of cracking that seal and seeing what's inside, thinking, oh, we're going to have heaps of shovels and cement and stuff like that. Open it up. There was 9 foam mattresses, a pallet load of toilet paper, and some broken coffee tables. That was it. 20-foot container, sent all the way from New Zealand. 9 foam mattresses, a pallet of toilet paper, which you can go down and buy anyway, and some broken coffee tables that people had just put in there, and that was it. So I think we've come a long way from that. One of the things that, and the Nepali government, I absolutely applaud them with this. They sent most of the rescue teams home. They didn't need them. And this is about these heroes. They wanted to be, you know, to pull someone out of the rubble after 4 or 5 days and be on national TV.
And I make a comment about the media because I experienced it elsewhere. It's
Yep.
a difficult one. The problem with the media is they go where the easy access is.
Yeah.
Who gives them the easy access? The bar of the US Army and so on.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
experienced that in Antarctica. They don't go out in the field.
Yeah.
And I mean, in emergency, that's a problem.
Yeah.
How do you get that information out?
Well, when you saw the channel TVNZ sent over a couple of people, and from the reporting, did you recognise what the reporting was behind him? It was the Grand Hyatt Hotel. He was reporting from the Grand Hyatt Hotel, the poshest hotel in Kathmandu, and even you could see the brick buildings behind him, but he was in front of some gardens and stuff to try and hide the posh, you know. It's one of the biggest hotels, so absolutely. That's the only access they were given. They weren't allowed to go out, but yeah, it's media and emergencies is a interesting. Anyone studying that? Okay, let's go a bit further forward. The seasonal calendar. The earthquake happened in the harvesting of the wheat and the barley, also in the planting of the crops beforehand. So the earthquake has really interrupted food security in Nepal, and one of the major things that we're trying to do there is, like Sushma said, about livelihoods. Reconstruction was not only for houses but for livestock protection, food storage, water supplies, irrigation canals, basically building up your livelihood again. People, for one example of this, in Gorkha, the district where the first earthquake happened, 98% of the toilets survived. Okay, they're all new toilets, they're all outside, they're built with concrete blocks. 98% of the toilets survived, and yet there was a massive problem with open defecation. The toilets are there. Why are people going to the toilet on their fields? What they turned out, people were using their toilets as the only thing standing to put all their goods, all their seeds, their things, their protection, their documents, the things that they needed to protect. They were stashing it into their toilet, and they had to use the fields because the toilet was the only thing that was keeping the water off the things they were protecting. So these are some of the things that made it a bit more complex. Winter is coming. If you watch Game of Thrones, this is true. This is a picture up in Solukhumbu, and this is obviously it's a very well-built tourist guest house. You can tell that's not a normal Nepali house, eh? That's a tourist guest house, and it's but you can see the damage on there and the winter effect, and this is what's going to happen across the mountains within about 3-4 months. We're talking about the monsoon; it's just about finished now, and in 3 or 4 months, November, December through to February, winter is coming, and if people haven't got winterisation of their reconstruction, there's going to be major epidemics, a lot of health issues, and people will basically evacuate and leave these districts empty. This is taken from some of the policies, and I'll just look at the highlighted parts. Don't bother yourself with all the things. Empower communities and integrated safer settlement principles. So these are the things that they're looking at. What are the principles? Long-term community resilience, strengthen local economies, sustainable and environmentally conscious processes, equitable and inclusive. I still think your PhD, your original PhD would be a valuable thing. And make sure they targeted strategies to specific needs of that settlement. And this is taken, if you want to look at, is the Government of Nepal Post-Disaster Needs Assessment. If you type in PDNA, it's a big document, it's about 50 pages long. What do we need? We need a people-centred approach. We need to understand and adapt to context. We need to coordinate for scale, and we need to be fast, and we need to have equity. We need to work together. We need to have, and this is taken straight from the shelter cluster thing, so they think housing and settlement is the key thing, just like the WASH cluster thinks water is the most important. But having a safe house in the winter is definitely important. Urban recovery, watch for emerging issues and the implications. And if you look at the sheltercluster.org, that's the place. You didn't mention, or you sort of mentioned it, but psychosocial support, PSS. This is an absolute must for any development program, recovery program. There's been an increase of youth of suicide has increased 41% since the earthquake. Nearly 1,500 people have killed themselves since the earthquake, which is a 41% increase. Nepal is one of the highest suicide rates in the world, but since the disaster, it's been a major problem. So anything that ADRA is doing, and I say this, and I was part of the Mental Health Advisory Council of Nepal, the issues that are involved in disaster with mental health is something that needs to be addressed, and probably has not been taken as seriously as you need to. Lack of hope. You know, if someone's house is gone and the government's been promising you're going to have something, I mean, there's just no hope, and that's the key thing, I guess. There's social things as well, separation from family. It's a very complex issue, and it's I couldn't give it one. But if you're going to say it's a lack of hope, so the government promises that no one really trusts government promises in Nepal. I don't think you'd agree. Mm-hmm. They promise a lot of things, like the Constitution, but a lot of those promises don't take place, or it's diverted or something like that. So one thing that I didn't find was the school leaving certificate was released just after the earthquake as well, and that is the year 10. It's the final year of most people's schooling, and when that is released, 60% of the year 10s fail, and the fail rate is 40%. So after that's released in all the papers and everyone sees who's failed, there's a big spike in suicide from that as well. So whether it's the disaster or whether it's the SLC results. Constitution, on Sunday it's going to be ratified, but most of the things have been ticked off. I won't say any more because you've said that very well. We talk about corruption, but I'd like to I didn't just put corruption, I put a definition of corruption. Because we all have different understandings of what corruption is. And if we put our definition of a Western government of, say, New Zealand, onto the government of Nepal, who do things differently and call it corruption, it puts a bad perspective on people's... they don't want to give money. Most of the leaders, most of the government leaders and the party leaders and the political leaders also are business leaders in any district. And the business leaders have construction companies. They own the trucks, they own something else, and it's all, you know, our idea of corruption is not, you would agree, is not the same as it is here. Now, change is going to disrupt the status quo, either a positive way or a negative way. So when we go in and we say, who wants a new house? Well, that is going to change, and we only give it to the most disadvantaged people, the Dalits or the Janajati or the most vulnerable people in the community, and we give them a new house and no one else. It's going to cause long-term tension in the community. So we have to think clearly about what we do there. The old proverb of do no harm is still true here. These are some of the constraints. This is a map from yesterday of the districts in Nepal that are affected by the protests. So green is prohibited to NGOs and UN. So if you've got a project in those districts, so Kaski, Pokhara is this one, isn't it? This one? Or maybe this one. Chitwan. These are some of all the Tarais where all the protests are. Obviously, brown is the general strike, so everything's shut. It's been shut since August 8. Red is curfew, and they've released a lot of curfews just recently, so a lot of reds have gone off this map in the last couple of days. But that's a curfew. You can't go out or you will be shot. And blue is roadblock, and this could be roadblock due to man-made roadblocks or roadblock due to landslide. So these are the roadblock here up to the China border. The main China access to Kathmandu has been blocked off. Jumla and Dolti, is that Dolti? No? Bajan, one of the high hills. So these are some of the constraints that will happen if, and the earthquake happened from here to here. Okay, so here's where most of the earthquake happened. It's luckily that all these here weren't badly affected by the earthquake. This is what a general strike looks like, if you don't know. That's just a taxi that's been burnt because he needed some money, obviously, and a taxi driver doesn't get paid unless he's taking people in a taxi. But a bunda, a general strike, says you can't drive. And he's got a family at home that needs to be fed. How does he work? He tries to take his taxi out. And they stop, they throw a firebomb in it, and there's no insurance for this. So a taxi, you know, about $18,000 for a taxi with a license and everything else, and it's gone. That's his livelihood. The guys in the blue there are police. And this is what a taxi will be facing coming down the road with these protests. But this was taken from a friend of mine just a couple of days ago on a wall in Kathmandu, and we will rise again. You know, Nepal is a very resilient community and country, and they will rise again. So, yeah, thanks very much.